Who decides who is a real woman? Politics or science? Manhattan was drowning in leaden clouds on a February morning. Rain pounded the glass walls of Trump Tower, creating the illusion that the building itself was weeping in anticipation of what was to come. Jessica Martinez stood at the window of a taxi, watching the majestic skyscraper rise before her, a symbol of the power and influence of the man whose name was emblazoned across its facade in gold letters. "Stop, please," she said to the driver, taking out her umbrella. Her heart was pounding like crazy. At 32, Jessica already had a reputation as a tough and uncompromising journalist. But today's interview could either take her career to incredible heights or destroy everything she had worked for in recent years. Her phone buzzed with a message from her editor. "Don't forget, this is your big moment. Trump has already confirmed the order to 3 other outlets, but he's not giving details. You need those details. Good luck." Jessica took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. Yesterday, a Trump administration whistleblower had sent her a document marked highly confidential. The summary of the executive order banning transgender women from women's sports was a bomb that would explode public opinion and further divide America. Trump Tower security greeted her with the usual ID scanning and checks. "Ms. Martinez, you will be escorted to the 32nd floor," the security chief said after calling upstairs. The elevator rose silently. Jessica repeated in her head the question she needed to ask. She had prepared all night, gathering statistics, expert opinions, medical studies, anything to put Trump up against the wall when the moment came. "You know, I've seen your reports," the guard who had accompanied her into the elevator said suddenly. "You're not afraid to tell the truth. But today, be prepared for a storm." Jessica looked at the man carefully. "What do you mean?" "The boss is on edge since early morning. Something big is happening." The elevator doors opened and Jessica stepped out into a spacious lobby decorated in Trump's signature style. Gilding, marble, paintings of him, and bulky furniture. Symbols of power and status literally screamed from all sides. "Miss Martinez," a slender woman in a formal suit approached her. "I'm Amanda Fisher, Mr. Trump's assistant. Come with me and we'll get you ready for the interview." They walked down a long hallway into a small guest room. "Makeup, water, everything you need is here," Amanda said. "You have 20 minutes, then we're going to the studio." Alone, Jessica pulled out her phone and opened the message she'd received the night before from an unknown number. "Trump wants to use this interview as a springboard for a new campaign. The executive order is just the beginning. There are bigger plans for the future. Also, his personal connection to this issue is deeper than it seems. Dig in that direction." Jessica reread the message several times. A personal connection? What could that mean? She had been keeping a close eye on Trump for the past few years, but she had never heard of his particular interest in women's sports or transgender issues. Makeup and preparation didn't take long. Jessica was used to working quickly, especially in tense situations. A couple of minutes before the appointed time, there was a knock on the door. "Miss Martinez, are you ready?" Amanda returned, accompanied by a tall man holding a tablet. "This is Michael Goldberg, Mr. Trump's press secretary," Amanda introduced. "He'll give a briefing before the interview." Goldberg looked Jessica over carefully, from head to toe, as if assessing a potential threat. "Ms. Martinez," he began formally, "there are a few rules that must be followed. First, no questions about Mr. Trump's personal motives. Second, the order will be discussed only within the framework of officially authorized information. Third, no provocations." "I understand, Mr. Goldberg," Jessica replied as neutrally as possible, hiding her inner excitement. "But you know, I can't refuse certain topics in advance. My job is to get the information that interests the public." Goldberg pressed his lips into a thin line. Mr. Trump agreed to this interview because he believes it is important to get his message across to the American people. But he will not tolerate foul play. "Honesty is my first principle, Mr. Goldberg," Jessica smiled. "I'm sure Mr. Trump appreciates a straight talk." They left the room and headed toward the studio that had been set up in the east wing of the building, specifically for Trump's media appearances. Along the way, Jessica noticed unusual staff activity, heightened security, and tense expressions on the faces of the staff. Something was definitely going on behind the scenes. Just before entering the studio, Jessica's phone vibrated again. A new message from the mysterious informant. "Sarah Thompson will be interviewed. She is already in the building, invited by the other side." Jessica's heart skipped a beat. Sarah Thompson is a former Olympic swimmer who came out 3 years ago and has become a symbol of the fight for transgender athletes' rights. Her presence completely changed the dynamic of the interview. "Is something wrong, Ms. Martinez?" Goldberg asked, noticing her confusion. "It's okay," Jessica quickly pulled herself together. "Just some final instructions from the editor." The studio was impressive in its size and technical equipment. 3 cameras, professional lighting, the latest microphones. Everything indicated that Trump took his media presentation seriously. Two chairs were placed opposite each other. Between them, a glass coffee table. On the walls, paintings of Trump at different periods of his career. "We go live in 15 minutes, said the director, a representative of the TV channel where the interview will be broadcast. "And are there any technical issues to discuss?" "No, I'm ready," Jessica replied, settling into a chair and allowing the technician to clip the microphone to her lapel. At that moment, the studio doors swung open and Donald Trump walked in, looking fit and energetic, wearing his signature dark blue suit and bright red tie. "Miss Martinez," his voice filled the air. "Finally, we meet face to face. I've been following your reports. Sometimes you're fair, sometimes you're not, but always interesting." Jessica stood up and shook the outstretched hand. Trump's grip was firm, confident, and dominant. "Thank you for this interview, Mr. Trump. I think we're going to have a fascinating conversation." "Oh, I'm sure of it," Trump chuckled, settling into the chair across from him. "America is going to hear the truth today, the truth that many are afraid to say." While the technicians adjusted the final details, Trump studied Jessica with an appraising eye. "Do you know why I agreed to interview you?" he asked unexpectedly. "Honestly, no," Jessica replied. "I was surprised when I got the invitation. Because you're not one of those journalists who has everything already decided. You have your own opinion. I like that, even if we don't agree with each other." Before Jessica could respond, the technical director announced a 5-minute readiness. The studio was filled with the bustle of final preparations. 3 minutes until broadcast. Trump adjusted his tie and hair, striking his famous pose, leaning slightly forward with his hands folded confidently. "Mr. Trump," Jessica said quietly, before the microphones were turned on, "I heard that Sarah Thompson will be on our call." For a split second, Trump's face changed. Something flashed in his eyes, but he quickly regained control. "Ms. Martinez, I am here to talk about the future of America and protecting our women. No matter who joins the conversation, my position remains the same." 1 minute until broadcast. Jessica felt the adrenaline rush through her veins. This was a career-defining moment, a moment that could change the national conversation. And she was ready to lead the conversation, no matter what turns it took. 30 seconds. She noticed a woman's figure through the glass door of the studio. Tall, slender, with short hair. Sarah Thompson was indeed there, ready to do battle. 10, 9, 8. Trump sat up straight in his chair, his gaze focused on Jessica with laser-like intensity. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The red lights of the cameras came on. The moment of truth had arrived. "Good afternoon, America. Today we have an exclusive interview with Donald Trump, who is preparing to sign one of the most controversial executive orders in years. An order that could change American sports forever and affect the lives of thousands of people across the country." Trump nodded slightly, his eyes flashing. He was in his element, ready to challenge, ready to fight. Jessica knew the next 2 hours would be a battle that all of America would watch. "Mr. Trump, tell us about your executive order banning transgender women from participating in women's sports. What exactly does it contain, and why do you think it is necessary?" Trump leaned forward, his voice deepening, more confident. "Jessica, this is about fairness. This is about protecting what American women have spent decades building. This order is the most progressive piece of legislation to protect women's sports in 50 years. And today, you're going to find out why." The studio door opened quietly. Sarah Thompson walked in and stood in the shadows, ready to engage in a conversation that could change her life and the lives of thousands of people across America. The boiling point had been reached, and there was no turning back. "Mr. Trump, let's start with the big question. What exactly does your order contain?" Jessica leaned forward, looking directly at Trump. Cameras captured Trump striking his signature pose, leaning slightly forward with his fingers clasped together, his face expressing absolute self-righteousness. "This order, Jessica, protects the integrity of women's sports. Women have fought for decades for their rights, for their leagues, for their competitions. And now, because of political correctness, we allow biological males to come in and take away their medals, their records, their scholarships, their opportunities. It's not fair and it's wrong. But critics argue that after hormone therapy, transgender athletes lose much of their physical advantages," Jessica countered. "That's a completely false statement. It's completely untrue," Trump said, waving his hand in a characteristic gesture. "Hormone therapy doesn't change your bone structure. It doesn't reduce your height. It doesn't change your lung capacity. The testosterone that's been building for years has left its mark. It's like giving a sprinter a little bit of a drug and hoping he'll slow down. He might slow down, but he'll still be faster than women." Jessica noticed Sarah Thompson, who had been in the shadows of the studio, step forward. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Mr. Trump, it appears we have an unexpected guest. Sarah Thompson, former world-class swimmer and current transgender rights activist. Ms. Thompson, would you like to join us for a chat? The cameras immediately turned to capture a new face in the studio. Sarah, a tall, athletic woman with short dark hair and a smart business suit, walked calmly to the empty chair. Trump sat up slightly, his gaze sharply fixed on the new panelist. Jessica, if you were trying to trap me, you could have just said so. I'm not afraid of a straight conversation. This is not a trap, Mr. Trump, Jessica replied calmly. My information is that Ms. Thompson's invitation came from your own office. Trump's expression flickered with surprise, quickly replaced by controlled anger. He turned to Sarah. Ms. Thompson, I respect your right to an opinion. Everyone has a right to an opinion in this country. But facts are facts. Biology does not change with surgery or wishes. Sarah calmly responded, Mr. Trump, I went through a gender transition 3 years ago. After a year of hormone therapy, my scores dropped 12%. After 2 years, they dropped 21%. I could no longer compete with regional women's records, let alone national ones. Your policies are based on fear and prejudice, not real science. One example doesn't prove anything, Trump shot back. I have statistics on hundreds of cases where biological males have dominated women's sports. Hundreds. I have nothing against you personally or anyone else who wants to live their life the way they want to live. This is America, the land of the free. But when it comes to competition, we have to rely on biology, not on how we feel. Jessica felt the tension in the studio rise. It was the perfect moment for the next question. Mr. Trump, there are rumors that your order goes beyond a simple ban. There is talk of mandatory medical checks and genetic testing for all female athletes. Is this true? Trump paused for a moment, his eyes narrowing. Jessica realized she had hit the nail on the head. This information had not yet been made public. The decree contains comprehensive measures to protect women's sports, he said slowly, including scientifically based testing methods. Nothing excessive, just what is necessary for fairness. So you're endorsing mandatory hormonal and chromosomal testing for all female athletes? Jessica insisted. I reaffirm that we use science, not ideology, to determine who can compete in women's sports. Sarah interjected sharply. Mr. Trump, do you understand what this means in practice? Teenage girls will be subjected to humiliating tests. Athletes with naturally high testosterone levels, like Caster Semenya, will be disqualified. You are creating a system that will hurt not only transgender people, but many cisgender women who simply do not fit your idea of femininity. We're only talking about background checks for people who we have reasonable doubts about, Trump countered, his voice hardening. Not for everyone. And yes, it may be unpleasant for a few, but it's true for millions. Jessica saw Trump's face begin to turn red. He was clearly annoyed that the conversation hadn't gone as planned. This was the moment to press harder. Mr. Trump, you mentioned reasonable doubt. Who will determine that doubt? Will this lead to profiling of female athletes based on their looks, body type, or race? Look, Trump said, raising his voice, this is going to be done by experts, top experts, medical experts. It's not me walking around with a ruler and measuring who's feminine enough and who's not. But the criteria, Mr. Trump, Jessica persisted. What specific criteria will be used? Chromosome analysis, testosterone levels, medical history, basic things that any normal person would recognize as important. Sarah shook her head. It's not as simple as you make it seem. Chromosomes don't always determine gender. There are intersex people with different combinations of chromosomes. Some women naturally have higher testosterone levels than others. You're creating a potentially discriminatory system based on a simplistic understanding of human biology. I'm creating a fair system, Trump snapped, turning to Sarah. And you know what? Most Americans support me, even if they're afraid to speak out publicly because of the cancel culture that activists like you have created. Mr. Trump, Jessica interjected, sensing the tension in the conversation. Let's get back to your executive order. Sources say it includes a clause banning federal funding for athletic programs that allow transgender athletes to compete in accordance with their gender identity. Is that correct? Trump paused for a second, his eyes darting to one of the aides standing behind the cameras. It was the moment of truth. He could either confirm the information or deny it. Yes, he finally said firmly. Federal money should not support programs that undermine the integrity of women's sports. If private organizations want to pursue their policies, that's their right. But taxpayers should not fund injustice. A heavy silence fell over the studio. This aspect of the order had not yet been discussed publicly, and Jessica knew she had just landed a national exclusive. Mr. Trump, Sarah's voice wavered for the first time since the interview began. Do you realize this is going to affect thousands of young people across this country? School programs, colleges, universities, they all rely on federal funding. You're effectively taking away transgender kids' ability to play sports. I am committed to protecting the ability of girls and women to participate in sports, Trump retorted. And by the way, no one is stopping transgender people from participating in sports. They can compete in the categories that correspond with their biological sex. You're asking a transgender woman who looks like a woman, lives like a woman, has documents as a woman, takes female hormones to compete with men? Sarah shook her head. It's not only absurd, it's dangerous. What's dangerous is when girls lose scholarships, opportunities, and dreams because of biological men invading their sports. Trump said, his voice rising, his face growing redder. I speak to thousands of parents who fear for their daughters' futures. They are the victims, not political correctness. Jessica felt the moment was right for the next blow. Mr. Trump, your press secretary urged me before this interview not to touch on personal motives, but now I can't help but ask, what is it about this issue that concerns you so deeply? Why is protecting women's sports a priority for you? Trump's face changed for a moment. Behind the mask of confidence, Jessica saw something personal, almost painful. I have a daughter, a beautiful daughter, and granddaughters. I want them to live in a world where they have a chance at justice, at equal opportunities, where their achievements are not devalued. He paused, then added more quietly, surprising everyone in the studio. And something else I haven't said publicly. My cousin was an athlete, a very talented one. In the 1980s, she competed against East German athletes pumped full of testosterone. It ruined her career and her life. I've seen what happens when biology is ignored for the sake of politics, and I won't let that happen again. Sarah shook her head. Are you comparing doping to transgender transition? They are completely different things. The result is the same, Trump snapped. Biological advantage, unfair competition, broken dreams. Mr. Trump, Jessica interjected, you mentioned your cousin. Are you talking about Carol Trump, who placed fourth at nationals in My information is that she did compete against East German athletes, but she never publicly accused them of cheating. Trump's face froze for a moment. Have you done any research on my family? It's my job, Mr. Trump, to prepare for the interview, Jessica replied calmly. But the question is, are you projecting your personal family history onto a contemporary situation that is fundamentally different? I'm projecting common sense onto a situation that requires common sense, Trump said, raising his voice. Men and women are biologically different. That's not my opinion. That's scientific fact. And yet, Sarah chimed in, modern science recognizes that gender identity and biological sex are different things. Medical research confirms the reality of the transgender experience. Look, Trump leaned forward, his voice hardening. I'm not against transgender people. Live your life however you want. But when it comes to competition, we have to be fair to everyone. Millions of girls play sports, dream of careers, of scholarships, of the Olympics. And what do they see? Biological males taking their place on the podium? That's an offensive oversimplification of a complex issue, Sarah countered. Transgender women are women, and after years of hormone therapy, their physical attributes are within the norm for women. Not true, Trump snapped. Absolutely not true. Height doesn't change. Bone structure doesn't change. Lung capacity doesn't change. These benefits persist regardless of testosterone levels. Jessica decided to change tactics. Mr. Trump, your order affects a huge number of people. Did you consult with medical experts on transgender issues before making this decision? Of course, Trump nodded. With the best experts. The best experts. Can you name them? Trump paused for a split second. That's confidential information at this point. When the order is officially issued, all the names will be made public. That's interesting, Jessica noted, because I've contacted the country's leading endocrinologists and sports medicine experts, and none of them have confirmed that they've consulted with your administration on this issue. Maybe you were talking to the wrong experts, Trump shot back. There's political pressure in academia too, you know. At that moment, the assistant director gave Jessica a sign, 5 minutes until the commercial break. The final blow had to be made before the break. Mr. Trump, sources say your order also includes a provision to create a special commission to look into suspicious cases. Is that true? Trump straightened up. Yes, there will be a panel of experts to look at difficult cases. That's normal practice. And who will be on this commission? Medical experts, sports officials, lawyers. The best people, believe me. Is there even one transgender person or expert on transgender issues among them? Trump hesitated to respond. The commission will be formed on the basis of competence, not identity. That is to say no, Jessica concluded. That's the wrong question. Trump began to sound visibly annoyed. We pick people based on their expertise, not how they identify themselves. Sarah interjected, but isn't it important to have people on a commission like this who understand the trans experience from the inside? You're creating a system that will make decisions about the fate of trans athletes without their representation. We're creating a system that will protect the integrity of women's sports, Trump snapped. And you know what? Most Americans agree with that, even if they're afraid to say it out loud because of cancel culture. Jessica noticed that the director was signaling a commercial break in a minute. It was time to ask one last question before the break. Mr. Trump, one last question before we pause. I have been told by reliable sources that your order also includes a clause to strip Olympic medals from athletes who later transition. Is that true? The studio went silent. Even the technicians, usually busy with their work, froze, waiting for an answer. This was an aspect of the decree that had not been reported in any media outlet before. Trump's face froze for a moment, then he nodded slowly. Yes, if a person who received a medal as a woman later admits to being a man, that effectively confirms that the competition was unfair. The medal should go to the real woman who came in next. You can't be serious, Sarah cried, her voice shaking with outrage. You want to strip people of their accomplishments for being who they are? This is unprecedented and completely unconstitutional. That's fair, Trump said, his voice rising, his face flushing. If you say you've always been a man inside, then you're admitting you were competing in the wrong category. That makes sense. That's not logical. That's cruel, Sarah nearly screamed. Gender identity is a complicated process. Many transgender people struggle with themselves for years before finding the strength to come out. Do you want to punish them for being honest with themselves? I want to protect the integrity of sports. Trump slammed his hand on the armrest. If we start ignoring biological reality in favor of feelings, where do we stop? Am I going to feel like I'm tomorrow and compete against college kids? We're going to a commercial break, Jessica announced, seeing the director's signal. Stay tuned. In an exclusive interview today, Donald Trump reveals details of his controversial executive order on transgender athletes, an order that is already being called one of the most controversial policy decisions of the year. As soon as the red light of the camera went out, Trump suddenly ripped the microphone off himself. It was a trap, he said, turning to his assistant, who immediately ran up to him. Who invited her? He nodded toward Sarah. Mr. Trump, Jessica maintained her professional calm. My understanding is that Ms. Thompson's invitation was cleared with your office. If this happened without your knowledge, there may be disagreement within your team regarding this order. Trump gave her a cold look. You think you have me cornered? That I will cower before your questions? I fight for what I believe in, unlike those who are afraid to tell the truth because of political correctness. Sarah, still sitting in her chair, said calmly, Mr. Trump, I'm not against debate, and I'm not against honest conversation. But your order is based on outdated ideas and prejudices, not modern science. Modern science? Trump snorted. The same one that's now afraid to say there are only two genders because it'll be labeled transphobic? That's not science. That's ideology. Jessica noticed the director holding up the 2 minutes to air sign. She quickly glanced at her phone. Social media was already exploding. The hashtags mocking Trump against transgender and protect women's sports were vying for the top spot on the trending list. 30 seconds until air, the director announced. Trump, despite his obvious irritation, resumed his professional stance, adjusting his tie and hair as he prepared to continue the interview. Mr. Trump, Jessica said quietly, before the microphones were turned on. In the second part, I'd like to go into more detail about the science behind your order. I have research that contradicts some of your claims. The data can be interpreted in different ways, Trump responded. I have the research too. The best research. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ether. The red light of the camera came back on, and Jessica braced herself for an even more heated discussion. She knew the next questions might upset Trump even more, but the truth was more important than comfort. We continue our exclusive interview with Donald Trump about his new executive order banning transgender women from participating in women's sports. Mr. Trump, before the break, you mentioned stripping Olympic medals from athletes who later transition. Doesn't that violate the principles of the Olympic Committee and international sports law? Trump shook his head. International organizations are also beginning to understand the dangers of ignoring biology. Many countries have already taken similar measures. This is not a question of politics. It is a question of justice. But the International Olympic Committee has its own rules regarding transgender athletes, Jessica noted. They require a certain level of testosterone for a certain period of time. How does your decree fit into those international standards? These standards are inadequate, Trump snapped. They are based on political correctness, not science. We go further because we do protect women. Sarah shook her head. Mr. Trump, you always talk about protecting women, but you ignore the fact that transgender women are women too. You exclude an entire group of people from your definition of women who need protection. Biological facts don't change with word, Trump countered. You can call yourself whatever you want, but DNA is still DNA. Jessica decided to change tack. Mr. Trump, let's talk about the practical implications of your order. According to sports organizations, the number of transgender athletes competing at a high level is less than 0% of the total. And yet, in the last 20 years, there has not been a single verified case of a transgender athlete setting a world record. Isn't your order a solution to a problem that doesn't exist? Trump frowned. That's not true. I have statistics that show a completely different picture. Dozens of records, hundreds of medals, all won by biological men competing against women. Can you share those statistics? Jessica asked. Of course it will be published along with the decree, but if you're basing such an important decision on it, shouldn't you first have a public discussion of the data with the scientific community? Trump waved his hand. We've had all the consultations that we needed. This is a very well thought out decision. Sarah chimed in. Mr. Trump, as someone who has personally gone through this process, I can tell you that your data is not true. Transgender athletes do not dominate women's sports. Most do not even compete due to fear of harassment and discrimination. These are emotions, not facts, Trump countered. I deal in facts. Okay, Jessica said, let's get to the facts. C'est the International Olympic Committee. At that moment, a voice from the back of the studio interrupted the tense discussion. I have something to say about that. All heads turned. To everyone's surprise, it was Emma Johnson, a 3-time Olympic swimming champion who had never spoken publicly about transgender issues before. She strode purposefully to the center of the studio, refusing the chair offered to her, choosing to stand. I've competed against transgender athletes, she said firmly, looking straight into the camera. And yes, I've lost to them, but I've also won, because elite sports aren't just about chromosomes or testosterone. They're about heart, discipline, and character. She turned to Trump, her eyes blazing with determination. Mr. Trump, I respect your commitment to protecting women's sports, but your order as it stands doesn't protect me or my fellow athletes. It divides us, it humiliates us, and it harks back to a time when women had to prove their right to compete. The tension in the studio was high. No one had expected this turn of events, least of all Trump, whose face was now a mixture of shock and barely concealed anger. The studio fell into a tense silence when the interview resumed after a commercial break. Jessica Martinez quickly reviewed the new material the producers had handed her: medical studies, statistics, and expert opinions that contradicted Trump's claims. Mr. Trump, let's get back to our conversation, Jessica began, holding up a folder of documents. During the break, I was given the results of a recent Stanford University study that was released last week. According to the data, after 2 years of hormone therapy, transgender women's physical performance is completely within the range of cisgender women. This directly contradicts what you previously claimed. Trump leaned forward slightly, his face skeptical. One study proves nothing. For every study that proves nothing, there's another that proves the opposite. Science shouldn't be politicized. But that's not the only study, Jessica countered, flipping through the pages. There's data from the American Medical Association, the Olympic Committee, the World Health Organization, all of which show that after an appropriate period of hormone therapy, transgender athletes don't have a significant advantage. Sarah Thompson added, Mr. Trump, you keep citing studies and data, but you have never provided them. Who are the experts you consulted? Why are their names kept secret? Trump frowned. My order is based on common sense and consultation with the best experts. When it is officially published, all sources will be indicated. Jessica felt the moment had come to take decisive action. Mr. Trump, we have reached out to the nation's leading sports medicine experts, and not one of them has confirmed their involvement in your order. In fact, most have expressed serious concerns about its scientific validity. Before Trump could respond, Jessica motioned to the director. The face of an elderly woman with gray hair and a piercing gaze appeared on the big screen in the studio. Joining us with Dr. Elizabeth Ramirez, the American Medical Association's chair of transgender health and the nation's leading endocrinologist. Dr. Ramirez, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. Dr. Ramirez nodded. Thank you for the invitation, Jessica. I think it's important to bring scientific clarity to this issue. Dr. Ramirez, Jessica continued, you've read the draft version of Mr. Trump's order. What is your professional opinion on its scientific validity? From a medical perspective, this edict is based on outdated data and a profound misunderstanding of the physiology of transgender athletes, Dr. Ramirez responded bluntly. Modern research clearly shows that after an appropriate period of hormone therapy, typically 2 years, key performance indicators such as muscle mass, hemoglobin levels, and endurance in transgender women are similar to those of cisgender women. Trump shook his head. With all due respect, doctor, you're only looking at certain parameters. What about height, hand size, bone structure? Those benefits persist regardless of hormone therapy. Mr. Trump, Dr. Ramirez replied patiently, there are always genetic variations in sports. Michael Phelps has disproportionately long arms and a unique body structure. Basketball players are often unusually tall. We do not exclude these athletes from competition. In fact, studies show that after hormone therapy, even bone density and fat distribution change significantly, approaching female parameters. At that moment, Jessica noticed Sarah Thompson's phone vibrating. Sarah quickly scanned the message and her face changed. Sorry to interrupt, Sarah said, but I was just informed that the full text of Mr. Trump's executive order has been posted online, and there are points in it that he didn't mention in our conversation. Jessica glanced quickly at the clipboard her assistant handed her. That's correct. According to published reports, the order requires genetic testing of all female athletes, starting at the high school level in competitions that receive federal funding. That's an exaggeration, Trump began, but Dr. Ramirez cut him off. This is not just an exaggeration. It is a dangerous measure. Genetic testing is not a reliable method of determining gender in a sports context. There are various chromosomal variations, intersex conditions, cases of androgen insensitivity, when people with XY chromosomes have completely female physical development. Mass genetic testing will lead to discrimination not only against transgender women, but also against many cisgender athletes with natural variations. Trump's face began to turn red. We're talking about isolated cases that will be looked at on a case-by-case basis. No, Mr. Trump, Dr. Ramirez countered. These variations are much more common than you think. Scientific estimates suggest that about 1 to 7% of the population has some form of intersex trait. That's millions of people, not just isolated cases. Jessica decided to change direction. Mr. Trump, your order also includes a provision for retroactive review of competition results from the past 5 years. Does that mean that athletes who competed under all the rules in effect at the time could have their titles stripped retroactively? If those victories were unfair, yes, Trump replied firmly. Sarah shook her head. This is unprecedented. You can't change the rules of the game retroactively. It violates every principle of sports law. I can and I will, Trump snapped. Fairness is more important than procedural formalities. At that moment, a new face appeared on the screen, a young woman with short dark hair and a determined look. We join Olivia Chen, an Olympic swimming champion, who wants to speak out on this issue, Jessica announced. Mr. Trump, Olivia began, I have competed and won internationally. I have competed against transgender athletes and know this issue beyond the headlines. Your order does not protect me or my fellow athletes. It creates an environment of suspicion and humiliation. Olivia, Trump tried to soften his tone. I understand your concerns, but this is about protecting opportunities for future generations of female athletes. But who gave you the right to determine which women are real and which are not? Olivia persisted. Sport has always been about overcoming limitations, about fair play. Your decree introduces discriminatory measures that will affect thousands of innocent athletes. Jessica sensed the tension in the studio was reaching a fever pitch. Mr. Trump, it has come to our attention that the nation's largest sports organizations, the NCAA, the U.S. Olympic Committee, and the National High School Athletic Federation are preparing a joint statement opposing your order. They call it legally dubious, scientifically unsound, and practically unenforceable. What's your comment? Trump's face froze for a moment, then he responded. These organizations have long been hijacked by leftists who put political correctness above fairness. But the American people are on my side. Mr. Trump, Dr. Ramirez interjected, you mentioned the American people. But did you know that, according to a recent poll, 73% of Americans believe that decisions about whether to allow transgender athletes should be made by sports organizations based on scientific evidence, not by federal mandate? Polls can say anything depending on how the questions are worded, Trump dismissed. Jessica decided to ask the key question. Mr. Trump, why did you refuse to publicly discuss this order? Why were there no hearings, no consultations with experts, no consultations with the athletes themselves? Because any attempt at open debate would be immediately stifled by cancel culture, Trump responded. People who speak the truth about this issue are harassed, lose their jobs, become outcasts. So you're admitting that you intentionally bypassed the democratic process? Jessica asked. That you don't trust the American people to have a civilized debate? I admit that I know how the modern leftist machine of suppression works. Trump pointed a finger at Sarah. And I did not allow it to stop necessary change. At this point, Olivia Chen, still on the line, spoke up with unexpected emotion. Mr. Trump, you talk about protecting women, but you don't listen to us. You make decisions about our bodies, our sports, our future, without asking our opinions. As an athlete who has dedicated her entire life to competition, I feel betrayed by this order. I defend your right to a fair competition, Trump insisted. But I didn't ask you for this protection, Olivia countered. None of my fellow athletes did. We are capable of setting the rules for our sport through our organizations, through science-based protocols, through open dialogue. Jessica saw that Dr. Ramirez wanted to add something. Doctor, do you have any final comments? Yes, Jessica. As a scientist, I am deeply concerned that this order ignores decades of scientific research in favor of political considerations. The science clearly shows that after an appropriate period of hormone therapy, transgender women have no significant advantage in athletics. This order is not based on facts. It is based on fear and prejudice. Trump, visibly irritated, raised his voice. This is not fear. This is common sense. Biological differences between men and women are real, and no amount of politically correct theories can change that. Jessica felt it was time for a final question. Mr. Trump, last question. Many critics say your order is not really about sports, but about a broader culture war, about using transgender people as a political tool. What do you say to those critics? Trump sat up straight in his chair, his eyes narrowing. I'm going to tell you they're wrong. This order is about fairness. It's about protecting women's sports. It's about common sense. And the majority of Americans, despite all the efforts to silence them, agree with me. But why then are sports organizations, athletes, and medical experts opposing your order? Jessica insisted. Because they're afraid to tell the truth in our totalitarian climate of political correctness. Trump snapped. This is an insult to all of us, Olivia Chen interjected. Are you saying that we professional athletes are incapable of expressing our own opinions? That we are simply puppets of some political agenda? What I'm saying is that a lot of people are afraid to speak up, Trump began, but Olivia cut him off. Mr. Trump, I am not afraid to speak out. I am saying it here and now. Your order hurts women's sports. It does not protect them. And I am not the only athlete who feels that way. At this point, Dr. Ramirez added, I would like to inform you that in response to the publication of the text of the decree, more than 200 sports physicians and scientists have already signed an open letter expressing serious concerns about its scientific validity. This is an unprecedented response from the scientific community. Trump's face darkened with anger. This is a politically motivated campaign, not a scientific assessment. No, Mr. Trump, Dr. Ramirez replied calmly. This is the voice of the scientific community, based on decades of research and clinical practice. And that voice says your order is contrary to modern science. Jessica saw the director signal the end of airtime. Unfortunately, our time is running out. Mr. Trump, Dr. Ramirez, Olivia, Sarah, thank you for this important conversation. Jessica, I want to say the last word, Trump raised his hand. This order will go into effect, despite all attempts to discredit it, and history will show that I was right. And I want to say, Sarah Thompson leaned forward, that we will fight this discriminatory ordinance through every legal means. The voices of the transgender community and our allies will be heard. Olivia nodded. And the voices of the athletes will be heard too. We will not allow our sport to be used as a field for political games. That concludes our exclusive interview, Jessica said, looking directly into the camera. Donald Trump's executive order banning transgender athletes from women's sports is now signed and in effect. But the debate is just beginning. What does this mean for American sports, for female athletes at all levels, and for our society as a whole? We will continue to monitor this as it unfolds. The red camera lights went out, but the tension in the studio remained. Trump abruptly snatched the microphone away, his face hard with suppressed anger. This interview had clearly not gone as planned. Instead of a triumphant announcement of his executive order, he was met with harsh, scientifically sound criticism from pundits and athletes. And all of America was there to witness it. The interview was already reverberating around the country at incredible speed. Jessica Martinez had barely had time to gather her notes when a production assistant came running up to her. You won't believe what's happening right now. The National Olympic Committee just issued an emergency statement. They are refusing to comply with Trump's order. The NCAA and the School Sports Federation have joined them, all saying the order contradicts their own science-based protocols. Jessica glanced at her smartphone, which was literally blowing up with notifications. Social media was in full swing. The hashtags "or not could Trump against sports" and Jessica interview were trending on every platform. "This is just the beginning," she said quietly, realizing the scale of what had happened in the studio. Meanwhile, in his private office at Trump Tower, Donald Trump was pacing between his desk and the panoramic window, his face red with anger. Who invited this Thompson? Who allowed a serious political interview to be turned into this circus? He turned sharply to his team of advisors, clenching his fists. Michael Goldberg, a spokesman, looked equally upset. "We're looking into it, sir. There may have been a leak of the interview. Martinez was clearly prepared for all the details of the order. She didn't know anything." Trump slammed his fist on the table. "We weren't prepared. Where was the analysis of possible questions? Where was the strategy for the answers?" The senior policy advisor cleared his throat carefully. "Sir, the problem is not the preparation. The problem is that the decree itself contains very controversial points that are difficult to defend publicly, especially the requirement for genetic testing for schoolgirls." "These are necessary measures," Trump interrupted. "Americans want to protect women's sports, and I am doing so. We need to issue a counterstatement immediately. Accuse Martinez of bias, of manipulation, and the experts of political bias." "Sir," one of the junior staffers raised his hand, holding a clipboard. "We have a bigger problem. Is reporting that senators from both parties are preparing a joint statement opposing the order, including several Republicans." The room went silent. Republicans turning against Trump was unexpected and dangerous. Trump sank slowly into his chair, his gaze deepening. "They think they can stop me. They're wrong. We're going to double down, launch a full-scale social media campaign. I want every conservative commentator talking about this tonight. We're not going to give in an inch." As Sarah Thompson exited the television studio, she found herself surrounded by dozens of journalists, microphones reaching out to her from all sides. "Miss Thompson, how do you feel after this interview? How do you rate Trump's response to scientific arguments? Do you think this decree will be repealed?" Sarah took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. The cameras recorded her every move. "What happened today goes far beyond politics or sports," she began, her voice firm and emotional. "Today, all of America saw that behind the abstract debate about transgender rights are real people, their dignity, their opportunities, their futures. Mr. Trump's order is not based on science or medical facts. You heard all that from Dr. Ramirez. It is based on prejudice and political calculation." She paused, looking directly into the cameras. "But most importantly, America heard the truth today, thanks to a journalist who wasn't afraid to ask the tough questions. Jessica Martinez showed what real journalism means in the age of alternative facts." Jessica found herself the center of unprecedented attention. Her desk was littered with messages and offers from other media outlets. "ABC is offering an exclusive interview in primetime tonight," her assistant informed her. "MSNBC wants you on their late-night show. The New York Times is asking for a behind-the-scenes op-ed. Oh, and even Fox News is reaching out. They want your commentary, though, perhaps to criticize." The editor-in-chief approached Jessica with a cup of coffee. "You just became the most sought-after journalist in the country, in 3 hours. That's a new record." He smiled, then turned serious. "But there's something more important. Sources in Washington say the White House is in a panic. Emergency meetings are underway at the highest levels." In Washington, an unlikely group gathered in a Capitol conference room. Senators from both parties, representatives of sports organizations, lawyers, and civil rights activists. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of historic momentum. "Trump's order is essentially unenforceable," said an Olympic lawyer. "The requirement to genetically test all female athletes not only violates their privacy rights, but is also technically unfeasible on a national scale." Moreover, Senator Harris added, "After today's interview, it is clear that the order is not based on scientific evidence or expert opinion. It is a purely political move that could cause real harm to thousands of young female athletes, both trans and cisgender." Republican Senator John Thorne, known for his conservative stance, unexpectedly supported her. "I've been defending traditional values my entire career, but this order goes beyond all bounds. Forcing schoolgirls to undergo genetic testing, retroactively stripping people of medals, that's not conservatism, that's extremism." "So are we in agreement?" the presiding congresswoman asked. "A bipartisan statement condemning the order as unconstitutional and calling for its immediate repeal?" A murmur of agreement swept through the room. History was being made right now, and everyone present knew it. It was well past midnight when Jessica finally returned to her Brooklyn apartment. What had begun as a simple, important interview had turned into something much more. A turning point in the national conversation about trans rights, journalistic integrity, and the limits of political power. She turned on the television, flipping through the channels. The interview and its aftermath were all over the place. Was broadcasting a 24-hour panel discussion. Fox News was trying to defend Trump, but even its commentators acknowledged that the order had problematic aspects. MSNBC was showing live footage of demonstrations that had spontaneously sprung up in dozens of cities across the country. Jessica went to the window. Even at this late hour, the streets of New York were unusually lively. People were gathering in groups, discussing, arguing. It was a living democracy in action. Her phone vibrated, another in a never-ending stream of reactions. But she recognized the number immediately. Donald Trump's private contact, obtained to arrange an interview. Ms. Martinez, this was a powerful interview. Not many journalists dare challenge me so openly. I propose that we continue our conversation. Next Tuesday, Trump Tower, 11 a.m. This time, no cameras, just you and me. There are things the American people need to hear, and I choose you as the conduit for DT. Jessica read the message over and over, not believing her eyes. Trump was inviting her to a private meeting after everything that had happened, after she had essentially ruined his carefully laid strategy. It was unexpected and disturbing. She put the phone down without answering right away. Instead, she turned back to the window, looking out at the lights of Manhattan at night. Today had changed a lot for the transgender community, for the political landscape, for journalism, and for her personally. But her gut instinct told her that this was only the beginning of a much larger story. Jessica saw her face reflected in the dark glass, tired but determined. She knew she had made a choice from which there was no turning back, a choice to stand on the side of truth, no matter the consequences. And no matter what happened next, no matter what offers came from Trump or other powerful figures, she would remain true to that choice. The lights of New York City shimmered in the darkness like a million stories waiting to be told. And Jessica Martinez was ready to tell the most important ones, the ones that would determine the future of the country and the lives of real people. She picked up her phone and began typing a response to Trump, knowing that her decision could change everything once again. Morning light filtered through the blinds of Jessica Martinez's apartment as she turned on the television to watch the news. It had been a week since her interview with Donald Trump, and events were moving at a dizzying pace. The screen showed footage of a press conference yesterday at the Capitol, where a bipartisan group of congressmen introduced a bill that would block Trump's executive order and establish science-based standards for transgender athletes to compete. To many people's surprise, the bill was co-sponsored by 23 Republicans, all but guaranteeing its passage. After extensive public discussion and consultation with medical experts, we have concluded that transgender participation in sports should be decided by sports organizations based on scientific evidence, not political fiat, said Reverend Susan Wright, a Republican previously known for her conservative views. Jessica sipped her coffee, reflecting on the incredible twists and turns of the last few days. Her interview, which had been broadcast more than 30 times on various channels, had been a turning point. Journalism awards and nominations had poured in, but more important were the real changes it had spurred. National sports organizations have come together to develop a unified protocol for transgender athletes based on the latest scientific evidence. Dr. Elizabeth Ramirez has chaired a special medical committee to ensure that all decisions are scientifically sound. Sarah Thompson has become a national symbol of the fight for transgender rights. Her quiet confidence and articulation of scientific arguments during interviews have made her a sought-after speaker and consultant. Jessica's phone rang, and it was Sarah. "Have you seen the news?" Sarah asked, genuine excitement in her voice. The Olympic Committee just announced that their new rules for transgender athletes will be based solely on science, not political pressure. That's a huge win. "I saw it," Jessica smiled. "It seems rationality is finally winning out over political rhetoric. And it's largely thanks to you," Sarah said seriously. "Your interview changed everything. You gave a voice to scientific truth and showed the real motives behind political decisions." After her conversation with Sarah, Jessica opened her laptop and began scanning the morning headlines. The New York Times ran a front-page story, "Scientific Truth versus Political Expediency: How One Interview Changed the National Conversation." The Washington Post analyzed the implications of the scandal for the future of transgender rights policy. Even conservative outlets acknowledged that Trump's order was rushed and poorly thought out. But the biggest surprise of the last few days has been Trump's own behavior. After an initial angry denial, he suddenly changed tactics. In a private meeting with Jessica, which did take place, albeit not without a press team at the door, he acknowledged that some aspects of the order may need to be reconsidered in light of new scientific evidence. This admission, although accompanied by many caveats, was a real breakthrough. For the first time in his political career, Trump actually backed down under the pressure of facts and public opinion. Jessica's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. A courier had delivered a package from an official offer to host her own weekly show, devoted to investigative journalism and hard-hitting political issues. Her career had skyrocketed after that interview, but as Jessica reread the terms of her contract, she wasn't thinking about money or fame. She was thinking about the letters she received every day from people all over the country, from young transgender athletes who thanked her for defending their right to participate in sports, from parents who were finally hearing scientific facts instead of political slogans, from journalists inspired by her principled stand. One letter in particular touched her, from a 15-year-old girl in Ohio. "I am a transgender athlete. Before your interview, I thought I had to give up the sport I love. Now I have hope again. Thank you for showing America that our lives are not just a political issue." Jessica picked up the phone and dialed the number of editor-in-chief. "I accept the offer," she said, "but on one condition. I want the program to focus not only on political scandals, but on topics where science and facts stand up to political rhetoric. For too long, we have allowed politicians to define reality. It is time to give the power back to the facts." When the conversation ended, Jessica walked to her apartment window. Below, New York went about its business as usual, people rushing about, taxis honking, street vendors. But something had subtly changed in the atmosphere. It was as if society had taken a small but significant step toward greater honesty, toward decisions based on facts rather than prejudice or political expediency. Her interview with Trump was a boiling point, a moment when the pent-up tension between political rhetoric and reality finally erupted. And from that boil, a new reality began to form, more complex, more nuanced, but also more honest. Jessica knew there were many battles ahead, that every step forward could be followed by 2 steps back, that the truth would always have powerful enemies. But today, looking out over Manhattan this morning, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time in her journalistic career. Real hope. Her phone rang again. The number on the screen was that of Olivia Chen, the Olympic champion who had spoken out in defense of transgender athletes during an interview. "Ready for the next big story?" Olivia asked without preamble. "I think I found something interesting about funding anti-trans campaigns. You'll like it." Jessica smiled. Yes, this was just the first chapter of a big story, and she was ready to write the next one.